Hi, I'm John McAuliffe, President of VFM Leonardo, and welcome to the VTV channel. Our channel is designed to bring you expert opinions and perspectives on the most important topics facing e-business in the hotel market today. Today we have Josiah Mackenzie with us. Josiah is the Director of Business Development at ReviewPro, where he helps CEOs and hotel executives increase sales by using social technologies to provide remarkable service for their customers. Today we're going to draw on his experience working directly with thousands of hotel chains, organizations, and hotels of all sizes around the world in setting up and managing their digital strategy. And we're going to discuss with them how hotels can leverage social media channels in a measurable way. Josiah, thank you for joining us and welcome to VTV.
Thank you, John.
So Josiah, as we all know, the hotel marketer today has an increasing number of tasks that they have to do to market their hotels. There's a lot on their plates. And a big part of tackling these tasks is trying to figure out how to incorporate them all into their overall marketing strategy. Of course, one of the areas that most of them are focused on these days is social media. And I find that hotel marketers are still trying to figure out what role it should be playing in their overall strategy. Compounding the problem is, unlike more traditional marketing or more traditional direct response marketing, if you will, results are not always the easiest to track. But it can be done, and we're going to talk about that today. So as someone with a real understanding and passion of social media, I'd like to hear from you and your opinions on the matter. If you were a director of marketing at a hotel, how would you know if what you're doing in social media is actually working?
Great question, and I think it goes back to, how do you tell if anything that you're doing is working? It's really measured in the effectiveness of how it helps you do what you have to do. So a prerequisite to measuring social media effectiveness is having a crystal clear picture of a larger strategy. And maybe that comes from you, maybe it comes from the corporate office, but until that happens, you can't measure. It's impossible. So once your strategy is clear, I look at ways that I could use social communication or insights from the social web to help me achieve my goals. And so there's progress that could be made in all departments. I would be looking at ways that I could use these insights to reach those goals. I'd also look at some cost savings or efficiencies across the different departments in the organization, whether it's in service, in feedback collection. Does this replace some of the mystery shopping or surveys that we do with guests? Maybe it provides some insight into business intelligence. What are the competitors doing? What are our market opportunities? We see applications for PR, for web traffic, for sales lead generation, time savings. It really depends what you need to be doing, and then understanding how do you use some of these social channels to reach that goal. And ultimately, a lot of this comes down to revenue and improving an ROI on those activities. We'll talk a little bit about that a bit later on the call. But I think there's many different opportunities here, and it would be a mistake to just look at social media as driving results in one solitary department or for just one single purpose. So I think to address your question, if I was responsible for monitoring social media for a group of hotels, I would view my role first as a facilitator. It would be about empowering my colleagues and giving them the insight that they need to tap into the opportunities that exist.
Right, so that's really covering off the monitoring side of it. Are there other elements of social media I should be looking at as a director of marketing for a hotel? How can I use social media to perhaps amplify my outbound marketing messages?
Right. So I like to look at social media as just another communications channel, right? It's not that different than using a phone or any other type of communication. So the same rules still apply. I think there is this opportunity for amplifying content that you are distributing and producing, activities that you're doing in other channels or in different areas, and repurposing that. We've seen a lot of activity with organizations producing an advertising campaign or rich media content, thinking about how does this play on the social web. And the thing is, the social web, I believe, was really built for rich media, right? People have said that photos and video are really the currency of a site like Facebook, because people want to experience, and the best way to experience travel, of course, is visually. And so there's this big opportunity there. I think there's also definitely an interesting community building aspect that I don't know if you want to explore a little bit more, but we have seen a lot of interesting activities where it's not just producing and putting the content out there, but understanding what content exists, what communities already out there, and how do I amplify that? How do I encourage those conversations?
Right. So help us. I would love to hear from you how a hotel marketer could do those types of things. Are there some simple ways or easy wins that they could have to help them, get some more value out of their social media efforts?
Right. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about community building, because I think many people, when they talk about social media, the community building could be one of those things that people either love or it gets a lot of not a lot of respect from some executives that are very focused on financial performance. The reality, though, is that communities online can drive financial performance, and they can drive revenue growth. They can drive guest satisfaction higher. And so just thinking practically on how to encourage that, you see a lot of hotel groups from Hilton to Gansevoort Hotels, a small collection in New York, to Corinthia Hotels, which has a bunch of properties in Europe. And what all these organizations that are doing, they have very dynamic, very strong online communities. And what they do is it's just a lot of listening. What are customers saying? How can we address questions that pop up? How can we proactively solicit conversations? And then it's also identifying who are the most active media producers, whether they're snapping photos and tweeting them, putting them on Instagram, thinking about how can they collect that and then showcase that along professionally produced content, because one doesn't replace the other. It's about creating this repository of great media content. And so I think this service-first mindset is what drives great community, and just that personal recognition, making people feel like a VIP, and sometimes that's just showing a behind-the-scenes look and what the hotel's operations are. But once that takes place, we've seen some incredible stuff where customers are actually reaching out and serving other customers and acting like ambassadors. They're speaking on behalf of the property and almost acting like salespeople. It's very very interesting.
Right, and certainly in the hospitality industry, that's kind of a foundation of being in the hospitality industry, is making people feel good about themselves and staying at your hotels. But you touched upon a point there where that community engagement or that community building can be viewed from two different angles. There's the people that want to build communities because they understand the cause and effect of a good community is going to eventually amplify their product or buy their product in some way, shape, or form. But there's also some people that look at investment as a direct ROI. And we're spending X dollars on social media. How do we measure the success of what we're doing there? Are there any easy measurements that a hotel marketer should be using to measure the success of building community online?
Sure. I mean, there's a number of different ways to do this. What's been really interesting is to look at Google Analytics, and they've added a whole social element so that you can split off and track a socially engaged customer and look at the difference in the time they spend on the site. Are they more invested in the site? Do they tend to book higher? So there's a lot of direct revenue that you can attribute. Of course, there's tracking codes that you could put in stuff like Twitter. We've seen some hotels experiment with monetizing and selling directly on Facebook. So I think that's definitely a play in driving direct revenue. Quite frankly, speaking to a lot of revenue managers, it seems like they're sort of split on this topic. Some feel that you can sell and monetize directly on Facebook. Others say, and very successful organizations, I would add, say that no, this is only about service. So I've seen it work for organizations in both ways. Something that's also interesting is to look at some of the insights from the social web and understand, can this be used to help us sell more effectively? We've had, we're at ReviewPro, we're building review analytics, right? So, I mean, we've seen hotels optimize pricing because consumers are willing to pay more for a hotel that has reviews that indicate excellent service. There's some distribution decisions that can be made. I think it all comes down to understanding what the value of social media is. And I think a lot of it is, if you're delivering excellent service, you're keeping your community happy, then it's in making those happy customers become salespeople. So just thinking, how can you encourage more direct bookings?
Right.
The number one reason people leave most hotel websites is to validate their decision and look at feedback elsewhere. So thinking about, how do you capture those ambassadors that can be promoting your hotel and have that displayed on your website so that people make that direct booking.
Right, and I guess at the end of the day, it's like all business activities or marketing activities, understanding what it is that you're trying to achieve out of this, and then putting in milestones to measure whether you're on the right track or not on the right track as you go through it. So everything doesn't have to be tied back to, the directly to the booking. It is cause and effect oriented.
It's a good point, John, and I think I was also talking with actually a revenue manager a couple weeks ago, where what his whole objective is to understand improvements that can be made at each stage of the buying cycle. So when people hit the homepage of a website, if he experiments with some social data or adds more social proof to that site, is there an increase in the number of people that move from the homepage to the booking page, or from the booking page and actually make the booking? So I think looking incrementally at improvements that can be made is also a really good way to prove ROI. Ultimately, it does come down to additional bookings, but looking upstream a little bit can be an interesting way to prove that.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you take a look at attribution and get beyond last click attribution and understand all of those touch points that someone has on the journey to purchase, and attaching attribution to each one of them in an appropriate fashion.
Exactly.
So before we end today's discussion, do you have any examples of hotels that have done a good job on measuring their social media efforts? And what are they doing to do that?
One of my favorite stories that I've come across recently, I was working recently with the Fiesta hotel group. They have about 7 different brands all over the world. And what's been really interesting is that I was involved in the early conversations with their group as they were thinking of expanding their social strategy. And what you get in organizations, obviously one person doesn't have complete decision-making power to roll out a campaign. And so it was really interesting to see how the innovative people in the company were balancing their desire to experiment with new technology with the understanding that they have to really convince the executive team on the value here. So what they did is they got some pilots. They got a few pilot projects going, and they were looking at a few key performance indicators that they knew that would be very interesting to their executive team. And this was the overall level of guest satisfaction using the global review index across all these review sites. They're looking at the position of hotels on review sites in each regional market. They're looking at the ranking of hotels versus their competitive set, and also customers' usage of social networks, and just to understand, where's the activity and where do we need to invest. So they ran these pilots for a little while, and they were noticing some trends emerge, and they would go back to their team, get a little bit more investment, and they would invest in the winners as was measured by these key performance indicators. And I think that's a very reasonable, rational strategy. I've seen this over and over again. This was just the most recent example of this. But it's making decisions based on where you're seeing success. And it sounds general, but I know there's a lot of, there's going to be a diverse group of people watching this video. And so I think rather than making one specific recommendation, it would be to do a lot of experiments, run a bunch of things to see what's going to work. And every hotel is a different situation, so you need to do that experimenting, see what connects with your customers, and then run with the winners.
Right. Josiah, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your insights with us.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, John.
To all the viewers out there, be sure to post your comments on this episode of BTB and subscribe to our feed to receive more valuable insights from industry experts. If you would like to suggest a topic that we could cover in future episodes, feel free to email us at btb@bfmleonardo.com with your suggestion.